What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Tim Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point Extra Point. As always, we have quite a bit of volleyball to discuss, as it is NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament time. The first 2 days are in the books. Today is the last day of the second round before we head on into the regional semifinals for the Sweet 16. Also, the NCAA Women's Volleyball Division III final is set. Juniata will face Wisconsin Whitewater in less than an hour. Who will win that matchup? And will Juniata pick up their 97th straight win? Also, back to the NCAA Division I Women's Volleyball bracket, we had quite a bit of interesting results. We had Missouri knocking off SMU in the second round, Chicago stunning BYU, and so much more. Handing volleyball, set to them. Some of our favorite volleyball action here on Set Point Extra Point. This is Tim Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point Extra Point here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hi eSports Radio fans. This show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, Single A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
Hey there, eSports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop, including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point Extra Points. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you've made your way to episode 6 of Set Point Extra Points. Without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, this show, as well as all of our other shows on IE Sports Radio, would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live on StreamYard. Please do follow IE Sports Radio on several different social media platforms such as X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. It would definitely mean a lot. We have surpassed 300 subscribers, and we're trying to get to 500 by the time the end of the year rolls around. So make sure you do that, and it would definitely mean a lot, especially to me. Also, make sure to check out our website, iesportsradio.com, and also check out IE Sports Radio on several different social podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, GeoSavan, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, the list goes on and on. For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. The way you can follow Set Point on social media is on X, formerly known as Twitter, at set_point.ie, and on Instagram at set_point.iesr. And you can follow me, the host, personally on X, formerly known as Twitter, at TimRodriguez1, if you so very well choose to do so. And without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. So this is only going to be like an hour show. This isn't going to be like too long of a show, I promise you all. So just to recap the first 2 rounds of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament, as well as preview the NCAA, as well as preview today's matches and the NCAA Women's Volleyball Division III Championship, because that's happening as well. All right, but without any further delay, let's get on into it. So the first day was quite phenomenal, and I might as well just recap the entire first round. I kind of did a live stream yesterday on the YouTube account from IE Sports Radio, but it was like 10 o'clock last night, and no one was awake, especially those on the East Coast. So there you go. All right, but going down from the upper right bracket or upper left bracket down to the bottom right bracket, we had Pitt sweeping Morehead State. That wasn't too surprising. We had Oklahoma reverse sweeping UTEP, the only reverse sweep so far in the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament. It was an incredible sight to see. Oklahoma just was so resilient, especially in that third set, and then they eventually built off that on the fourth set and just dominated their way through the fifth set. I'll give a lot of credit to UTEP. They came out firing on all cylinders in the first 2 sets, and they deserved to be in the NCAA tournament. I know they were one of the last 4 teams in, but I will say against Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma being battle-tested in the SEC really helped them out. And Oklahoma's had such a great turnaround. So props to the Sooners. They'll be facing Pitt later on today at the top of the hour. Then we also had TCU sweeping Hawaii. Now, I don't know about you all, but I actually expected this to be a little bit more of a barn burner. I thought Hawaii was at least going to take a set, but TCU did a great job of keeping Kaylin Alexander in check.
TCU also ran their offense effectively, especially with Melanie Parra. And TCU being in the Big 12, they were battle-tested as well. Now, Hawaii, this was one of Hawaii's younger teams. They had a fantastic season, obviously winning the Big West Conference Tournament Championship. But they had such a young team, only 2 seniors being Kate Lang and Taylor Takan. I'm blanking on her last name, but it's a tough name to pronounce, but it's Kaylee Takanaga. Either way, that's the libero or Taylor Ikanaga. That's her name, Taylor Ikanaga. Kate Lang and Taylor Ikanaga were their 2 seniors, the libero and setter for Hawaii. And unfortunately, it was a tough year this year for Hawaii, but the fact that they wound up winning the Big West Conference Tournament Championship was quite an accomplishment. So big ups to Hawaii. Unfortunately, their tournament ended, or their season ended right there. And then we had Oregon sweeping High Point. Again, another not surprising matchup right there. Then we had Kentucky sweeping Cleveland State. Not too surprising right there. We had Minnesota taking down Western Kentucky in 4 sets, which I was impressed with Minnesota. They really came to play against Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is one of those sneaky good teams in the NCAA tournament. They play some really good volleyball come the tournament. Against Minnesota, though, it was kind of like last year's NCAA tournament match where Utah State, which had themselves a fantastic season, drew Minnesota, who was having a little bit of a down year, and Minnesota was able to pretty much weed them out as well. I mean, I'll give a lot of credit to Travis Hudson's team. Western Kentucky was resilient in that 3rd set. I mean, most teams that are down 0-2 to a Big Ten team are probably going to pack it in, but Minnesota, obviously, they've had themselves a great season with some marquee wins, like against Wisconsin and Texas, and pushing teams like Stanford to 5. And then Western Kentucky, they won their Conference USA tournament. But unfortunately, their road ended there against Minnesota, but not without a great effort. So Minnesota-Kentucky was that 2nd-round matchup. And then I'll get to that a little bit later. Then we had Missouri sweeping Texas State. That's a solid team that Missouri just took down. Missouri taking down Texas State was no accident. Missouri has had a fantastic season. They were battle-tested in the SEC. They actually had a chance to win the SEC, but unfortunately, the cards just didn't fall their way. But it did not come without beating Texas on Texas's home floor, and they had a few other marquee wins. They pushed Florida to 5, they pushed Kentucky to 4, and Missouri, you're going to see that Missouri's success was no accident. Then SMU swept Wichita State, no surprise there. Yesterday we had the last match of day number 2. We had Stanford sweeping Sacramento State. I mean, that one was kind of expected. Stanford is still Stanford. And this matchup was a fun one. LMU beating Washington in 5. LMU went up 2-0 in the match, and they were just dominating the 3rd set. I think they were up 7 by as many as 7. And then Washington just furiously came back, took a 22-21 lead, and eventually won the 3rd set, 25-23. Eventually, Washington won the 4th set with, I would say with ease, but with fairly good amount of ease. They just looked strong. And then the 5th set was just back and forth. LMU needed overtime to win, and LMU wound up winning it off of a unsuccessful challenge from Washington. And Sam Hastings, I've been talking about her being a fantastic libero. She is indeed a legit libero. So she's the real deal, and she had a great up, and there was no doubt in my mind it was up because she sprawled for that ball quickly. It looked like it could have been down, and I commend Leslie Gabriel for challenging the call just because you don't want to go out like that, and up and down calls can be 50-50. But for Sam Hastings, she got that ball up, and eventually it set up LMU for the win. That was a nice win by the Lions as they wound up winning the West Coast Conference for the first time since the 1990s. Trent Kirsten has his team on the up and up, and they've been really impressive. And then Washington, they made their appearance back in the NCAA tournament after missing it last year. Obviously, it was a tough loss for them, but they gave it all they could handle. Most teams that are down 0-2 to a talented team such as LMU might be packing it in, but not Washington. They really performed well, and it's great to see them back in the NCAA tournament. They were another team that was a last four in team. So I commend Washington on a fantastic season. Then we had Florida sweeping NC State. This one was kind of surprising, but then again, when Florida has a very talented player such as Kennedy Martin, they're not losing a whole lot. So a good win by Florida, taking down a very talented NC State team, which wound up winning on the last day of the regular season against SMU via a reverse sweep. That right there is the definition of playing until the final buzzer sounds. And then Kansas took down Colgate. It wasn't a dominant win. Colgate did a good job of staying within the match, but Kansas was able to stand on business. The Jayhawks, I thought looked pretty solid. I mean, at times there were chances where Colgate could possibly extend the match, but come on, this is Kansas we're talking about. Then we had Purdue taking down Western Michigan. Western Michigan's not a bad team by any means. I thought Western Michigan might have had a chance to push Purdue, but this is Purdue we're talking about. They have Eva Hudson, Chloe Chicoine, Raven Colvin, Taylor Anderson, among others, as Purdue was not going to lose this one. Now, a team that I wasn't expecting to lose was BYU, as Loyola Chicago swept BYU in the first round. It was the first match which went live, which started, and Loyola Chicago brought out the brooms and swept BYU. Now, it has been a minute since BYU has been dismissed in the first round of the NCAA tournament, especially under Heather Olmstead. But Loyola Chicago hadn't even won an NCAA women's volleyball tournament match. They probably had like postseason wins in the NIVC, but the NCAA tournament is a whole different beast. The Ramblers winning that matchup says a lot of things about their program. They're resilient. They truly deserve to win the A10 conference tournament over Dayton, mind you, via a sweep. And it shows that Loyola Chicago does belong in this tournament, and they really proved themselves in that matchup. But it was very surprising to see BYU just have themselves such a down match in the first round of the NCAA tournament, because again, it's been a minute since they've lost in the first round. And I don't think they even lost a first round match under Heather Olmstead, but them's the breaks, unfortunately. And Loyola Chicago, they advanced to the second round. And more importantly, they now have more NCAA tournament wins than the Chicago Untouchables of the NBA had playoff wins. Let that sink in right there. Okay, that's a little mean right there, but honestly, it's the truth. It's a great win for Loyola Chicago. Unfortunately, the other Illinois team wasn't really, well, these two Illinois/Chicago teams weren't so lucky. Northern Iowa took down Illinois in 4 sets. I kind of expected Illinois to win this one. I thought they would, but then again, Northern Iowa is one of those sneaky good teams where they play some of their best volleyball in the postseason. They're not the flashiest team that draws the headlines in from the regular season. They're obviously not the flashy Power 4 conference team like Nebraska and Pitt and Penn State, but they play some darn good volleyball come the postseason, and they schedule pretty tough as well. But Illinois was making its first tournament appearance since 2021 when it advanced to the Sweet 16, which was the year they toppled Kentucky in the round of 32. So good job to Chris Tomas's team for getting back to the NCAA tournament, but unfortunately their road ended there. And then Louisville defeating Chicago State in straight sets was not too surprising by any means. All right, to the upper right bracket, we had Penn State taking down Delaware State. Yeah, this was kind of a little bit of an ugly match. Penn State took down Delaware State. The first set was a clear indicator of how this one kind of went. Penn State won the first set 25-4, which that was tough right there if you're Delaware State. Fortunately, they were able to get it together and make it a little bit more respectable. Unfortunately, Penn State just stood on top of business. The match before that was North Carolina-Yale, where North Carolina was able to down Yale in 4 sets. Now, Yale won the first set, but the Tar Heels wound up winning the second set, then third set, then fourth set, as UNC had been battle-tested in the ACC. I wasn't too surprised that they would win this one. I thought it maybe would have gone 5, because Yale is a respectable team. Don't get me wrong. That team is a very solid team coming out of the Ivy League. But North Carolina, having been more battle-tested, just seemed a little bit more comfortable. Then we had Marquette sweeping Florida Gulf Coast. As much as I like Florida Gulf Coast, being in the NCAA tournament, Marquette obviously had taken their licks. Obviously, it kind of was an up and down season with struggling in the Big East, even though they didn't lose a whole lot. And then obviously the big sister being Creighton kind of stood on top of business when it came to those two. But for me, Marquette was kind of the clear cut. Marquette looked clear cut as the better team. So you have that right there. And then we had Utah sweeping College of Charleston. That wasn't too big of a surprise. We had Texas sweeping Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Not too big of a surprise. Then USC swept UT Arlington in their first round match. That was a nice win by USC. UT Arlington is a solid team coming out of the WAC, which wound up pulling off a dramatic 5-set win over Grand Canyon. But USC really let UT Arlington have it. I thought USC played some pretty darn good, clean volleyball. And when USC does that, they're not the easiest team to take down. Then we had another big star. We had Ole Miss taking down Florida State in 5 sets, which Ole Miss, they hadn't even won an NCAA tournament match before beating Florida State, but they did so. Emma Ammerman, who is the younger sister of Dalton Ammerman, former Long Beach State men's volleyball standout, and Ryan Ammerman, who was an assistant coach for UC Irvine men's volleyball. She had herself a game, as well as many others. Now, for Florida State, it was kind of a bummer seeing them bounce in the first round. It's like back-to-back. I think this is like the 3rd straight season where Florida State has lost in the first round, which kind of makes me wonder, why is it that Florida State looks so good in the regular season, but then they just look like a whole nother meh team in the postseason? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, last year was an exception because they faced Melanie Parra and the talented TCU team. This year, Ole Miss, I mean, I feel this was kind of winnable, but I feel Florida State kind of showed its cracks throughout the entire season. Then we had Creighton taking down South Dakota. No surprise there. Wisconsin swept Fairfield in the lower right bracket. No surprise there. This was another big matchup. This was another fun matchup. Georgia Tech took down Tennessee in 5 sets, which I thought was impressive. Georgia Tech obviously had been bitten by the injury bug. Get it? Because they're the Yellow Jackets. I digress. But yeah, Georgia Tech was able to outlast Tennessee, which, I mean, it's no surprise there. I feel Georgia Tech was battle-tested, and obviously they took their licks throughout the entire season, not being at full strength. But that eventually toughened them up to take down a talented Tennessee team coming out of the SEC. Then we had Texas A&M taking down Colorado State in four sets. Now, the 3rd and 4th set, Texas A&M really needed to work against a talented Colorado State team coming out of the Mountain West. But I think being in the SEC really helped Texas A&M. You got to give credit to Colorado State. They were the real deal. Unfortunately, they just missed out on a few points here and there, which could have maybe swung the match to them, maybe even forced a 5th set. But Texas A&M stood on top of business. Speaking of standing on top of business in Tempe, Arizona, we had Arizona State taking down New Hampshire in straight sets. We had Baylor taking down Wofford in straight sets in their first round matchup. We had Dayton taking down South Carolina in 4 sets, which for a team that hadn't faced a top 50 opponent and that hadn't really been challenged all season and that lost in the A-10 conference championship to Loyola Chicago, Dayton looked pretty solid. I actually had South Carolina advancing to the Sweet 16. God, that seemed to have blown up way, way badly. But yeah, Dayton, that's a pretty darn good Dayton team, which you're going to find out in a little bit. But to close off the first round, we had Miami sweeping South Dakota State. Again, this is another case of South Dakota State not being as battle-tested as Miami. Miami had wins over Texas, Stanford, and Georgia Tech, just to name a few. And being battle-tested in the ACC really helped them out. So I thought Miami just looked much better than South Dakota State. And then Nebraska swept Florida A&M to close off the first round. Again, we thought Penn State's match against Delaware State in the first set was bad. Nebraska beat Florida A&M in the first set 25-3. Yeah, that's a team that stands on business and that's out for redemption. I mean, nothing against Florida A&M, but Nebraska was indeed the real deal. I want to say that might be tied for the most, the biggest margin of defeat in a set in the rally scoring era, up to 25 points. I could be wrong about that one, but I did read in an article that Penn State did beat an opponent, I think 25-3 back in the rally scoring era, and when the target score was up to 25 points. But I digress. Anyway, so that was the first round. To round two, obviously I mentioned Pitt, Oklahoma. That's going to be today. We had Oregon taking on TCU in 4 sets. TCU looked strong in the first set, but Oregon really stepped it up. They really prevented the ball going to Melanie Parra a whole lot. TCU didn't really run their offense all that effectively, and Oregon got the ball to Mimi Collier, who I thought was pretty darn good, if you ask me. I mean, compare Mimi Collier's night against TCU to the night against High Point. There's no contest. So Oregon advanced to the Sweet 16. They're back in the Sweet 16, which I think is pretty darn impressive. Then we had Kentucky beating Minnesota in 4 sets. Now, I was one of the few bold people to put Kentucky through to the Sweet 16. I know most people kind of had Minnesota advancing to the Sweet 16 over Kentucky, but honestly, Kentucky, the third and fourth set were the turning points of the match. I mean, the third set, I think, was a big turning point, but Kentucky also needed overtime to win the match, to clinch the match. And Minnesota, by all means, was not bad. I think Kentucky just was a little bit of a cut above the rest. I think Kentucky just had that edge over them. And again, being battle-tested in the SEC and being battle-tested early on, I think really helped Kentucky. I mean, the same can be said for Minnesota, but Kentucky, to me, I think was pretty impressive. So they advanced to the Sweet 16 for the second straight year, where they actually will be facing a familiar foe. They'll face a SEC foe in Missouri, as Missouri took down SMU in 4 sets, which this was the big shocker of the tournament in the second round. Missouri beating SMU was not on anyone's bingo card, at least not a whole lot of people's bingo card. But Missouri being battle-tested, the Dawn Sullivan effect continues, as she has done wonders ever since taking over as head coach, coming from UNLV. And Missouri has just been fantastic. And beating a team like SMU on the road, it was a 7-2 seed in terms of a region. And SMU, they just didn't look like themselves. First 2 sets were won 25-21, 25-14 by Missouri. Then the third set, SMU needed a whole bunch of, I wouldn't say miracles, but they needed a whole lot of everything to keep themselves in the match and force a fourth set. They actually wound up winning that third set 33-31, which is the longest point total of any match of the NCAA tournament this year. But fourth set, Missouri was able to clinch the fourth set, even though SMU had a nice little kick save. But Missouri kind of pulled the plug and ended SMU's tournament run. So Missouri advances, where they will face Kentucky in the Sweet 16. So battle of 2 SEC teams. I really love it. And this is such a great turnaround for Missouri. They used to be one of the worst teams in the SEC. Now they were one of the best teams in the SEC. Almost had a chance to win the SEC crown, but losses to Florida and Kentucky kind of derailed those hopes. Then Stanford LMU will be playing tonight, and Florida Kansas will be playing tonight. Then jumping down to close off the lower left bracket, we had Purdue sweeping Loyola Chicago. As much as I would like to have seen Loyola Chicago, keeping their season going after winning their first ever NCAA tournament match, come on, they weren't going to lose. Purdue was not losing, especially with players like Eva Hudson, Chloe Chicoine, like I mentioned earlier. So honestly, Purdue just stood on top of business. It was a great season for Loyola Chicago. They represent the state of Illinois well. Like when you're one of 3 teams that advances to the second round, you're the only team out of 3 Illinois teams that advances to the second round, you're doing something right. Then Northern Iowa, Louisville is going to be a solid matchup right there. That's today. Jumping to the upper right bracket, you have Penn State versus North Carolina. A little bit of a Penn State connection, as Penn State, North Carolina, it could be a sneaky good matchup. I still think Penn State has the edge over the Tar Heels, but don't count out UNC. They were battle-tested in the ACC. They were ranked a little bit in the AVCA coaches poll. So you have that right there. And then yesterday we had Marquette taking down Utah in 5 sets, which Marquette actually advances to their first ever Sweet 16 or regional semifinal, which I thought was pretty darn good. Marquette needed everything and more to win that 5th set. Utah kind of made a little bit of a comeback. Marquette overcame an injury in the 5th set, which I thought was pretty resilient by them as well. And it was actually Ryan Theis's 400th win as head coach, which I thought was pretty darn good if you ask me. So great job to Marquette on winning that matchup. Unfortunately, it was a tough loss for Utah, which was making its first NCAA tournament appearance since 2021, which was actually the last time they were ranked prior to this season. So good job to Beth Lanier's team getting back to the NCAA tournament and finishing in the top 3 in the Big 12 after being projected to finish, I think, 9th. But regardless, Utah shattered expectations and more. Unfortunately, they just fell 1 match short from advancing to the Sweet 16. And then Texas swept USC in the second round. As much as I wanted to see USC in the second round, this is Texas we're talking about. This is the reigning back-to-back champions. This is a team that returns Maddie Skinner, Jenna Wennis, Emma Halter, Ella Swindle, among others. And they brought in Regan Rutherford as well. To me, I thought USC set Allie Batenhorst a little too much, if you ask me. I feel Allie Batenhorst was set practically almost every time, and Texas saw that coming from a mile away. And in my opinion, I thought Texas was ready for that, and I thought Texas had a little bit more balance offensively. So great job to Texas for being ready for that. Again, I really would have liked to have seen SC advance to the Sweet 16, but they would have needed to play some good volleyball. And when I saw they dropped that first set, because they were actually leading for a good chunk of that first set, unfortunately, they just could not hold the lead. And that's kind of the trouble when facing a Texas. When you let a lead slip away and Texas takes that first set, you gotta really work hard in the next few sets. And then we had Creighton sweeping Ole Miss. Now, sweep does not indicate that this was a blowout. Creighton in the first 2 sets really needed some comeback magic against the Rebels. Thankfully, they were able to grind it out in those first 2 sets, and then Creighton was able to blow by Ole Miss in the 3rd set. So the final score doesn't indicate how Creighton was able to win this match. It was a tough, contested match, and Ole Miss had their chances, but unfortunately, facing a talented team on, again, being Creighton on the road, you're going to need to play some really good volleyball. And unfortunately, Ole Miss did not do that. But they made history. They were back in the NCAA tournament. They wound up winning their first ever NCAA women's volleyball tournament match. And they can only go up from here. But Creighton, speaking of going up, they advanced to the Sweet 16. Texas-Creighton's going to be a fun matchup. But more on that later. Then we had Wisconsin taking down Georgia Tech in 4 sets. Now, this was an interesting matchup. Everyone knows that Wisconsin has one of their more younger/inexperienced teams in the NCAA women's volleyball tournament. But what people don't know is that team still has the tank herself, Sarah Franklin, as well as Anna Smrek and Devin Robinson. Charlie Furbringer has done an excellent job this season. Also, Gulsi Guchtikin did a fantastic job at libero. And I think Wisconsin might be a dark horse to win it all. I mean, I don't expect them to win it all, but I expect them to make it to the Elite 8. Some might actually have Wisconsin out in the round of 16, but that's a time will tell process. Speaking of the round of 16 and who they might be playing, Texas A&M, Arizona State is who they'll be drawing the winner of next week in the Sweet 16. Then we had Dayton taking down Baylor in 5 sets as Dayton advanced to their first ever Sweet 16. Again, this is another indicator for Dayton having not been battle tested all season, playing some of their best volleyball when it matters most against 2 Power 4 opponents. And Baylor, they were hosting. So the fact that Dayton pulled off that win was very impressive. And I think we're all overlooking Dayton. I think the regular season does not define Dayton all that much. I mean, Dayton had that match with Ohio State, which was unfortunately ruled no contest, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. Them's the breaks. But Dayton, and obviously Dayton had that loss in the A10 Conference Tournament Championship to Loyola. I think that loss might have been the best thing for them because Dayton only had 1 loss prior to that prior to losing to Loyola Chicago. And I think they got that bad loss out of the way, and I think it kind of made Dayton kind of look at the bigger picture, saying that as long as they get into the NCAA tournament, they could still make some magic happening, and the regular season doesn't mean squat. And look at them now. They are off to the Sweet 16, which I think is impressive. They'll face the winner of Miami, Nebraska, which I think is going to be a fun matchup. Everyone expects Nebraska to win, and I expect Nebraska to win, but do not underestimate Miami. They've got a very good outside in Flo Marie. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Miami really pushed Nebraska. Like, this could be a very challenging run to the NCAA tournament for Nebraska. But I have them winning it all, and you know the old saying, the tougher the path, the sweeter the reward. And I think Nebraska definitely has what it takes to win it all. But they're going to need to beat some really good teams. All right, but that is that for the first 2 days of the recap. Honestly, if you have the fifth set, or if you have ESPN Plus, the fifth set is a must. And honestly, get it. I don't care if you have to pay a little bit of a fee. If it's like, honestly, my brother was nice enough to let me use his ESPN Plus package, which I thought was pretty cool. So respect to him right there. But yeah, check out the fifth set. It really is a game changer, especially for volleyball fans. It's like NFL Red Zone for NCAA women's volleyball matches, which I think is really cool right there. So definitely get it, or get ESPN Plus. It's the last day of the fifth set, which is going to make me sad. But again, they did such an amazing job. People like Sam Gore, Paul Sunderland, Anne-Marie Anderson, the list goes on and on. They all did an amazing job. I enjoyed the fifth set, and I enjoyed the coverage, and I'm glad ESPN is putting it ESPN is putting the fifth set on national TV on ESPN2 and ESPN. But that's kind of my little take on the fifth set right there. Not, all the good outweighs the bad, and if you're one of those negative people, then I don't know what to tell you. All right, but now for the second round matches to watch for today. So we have Pitt, Oklahoma. There was one person in the ESPN bracket challenge that actually has Oklahoma beating Pitt. If this happens, then I don't know what to say. I mean, Oklahoma should give Pitt a battle, but this isn't 2019. Pitt is way better than that team was. Pitt is hosting. Pitt has Olivia Babcock. They have Rachel Fairbanks. The list goes on and on. Dan Fisher is the man Fisher. Oklahoma will challenge Pitt, but I expect Pitt to come out on top. And then we have Stanford versus LMU. Look, this is a great matchup, right? This is a sneaky good matchup right here. LMU, NorCal versus SoCal battle. But LMU could only do so much against talented opponents. I mean, they have some solid wins. They obviously came out of the West Coast Conference, but there wasn't the stiffest competition. And they were a little fortunate to see Pepperdine kind of fumble. Well, I wouldn't say fumble, but stumble across the finish line, as well as San Diego. But LMU, I expect them to battle Stanford. But again, this isn't like 2015 or that one year where LMU had Sarah Sponsel and LMU stunned Stanford in the round of 32. So, yeah, I don't think Lightning's going to strike twice, but I expect LMU to battle. Like, Stanford just has too much across the board. They have Cammie Minor, they have Aaliyah Rubin, Sammy Francis, Alina Ogilvy. The list goes on and on for Stanford. I just don't see Stanford losing this match. Then we only have Florida versus Kansas. This one's going to be underrated. Now, if Florida can really get Kennedy Martin going, as well as some of their other players, and hopefully for Florida's sake, they're at full strength, because I did see a match a most recent match where AC Fitzpatrick was out due to injury. I think Florida might actually have a shot, but Kansas is Kansas, and they are just too good. I mean, I know Kansas had their ups and downs where they lost to the Arizona schools, but bounced back, and then they lost to BYU on the final week of the regular season. But honestly, I think Kansas should stand on business. It won't be easy, though. Like, Florida is on a mission to prove everybody that they maybe should have deserved to host, but what can you do? And Marcus Loves Great pops in the chat room. He says, salute. And then Marcus says, wait, we got set point gear. I need that. Well, unfortunately, it's kind of custom made by myself, which kind of cost a pretty penny. But yeah, here's this comment right there. Yeah, we did get I got some set point merch, but it's kind of to make me look a little bit more official. But once I get up to that big famous stage, once I become famous, I will hook you up with some set point gear, some set point polos, some crispy set polo tees. I assure you that, Marcus. So don't think I forgot about you, my brother. But yeah, back to the preview. Then we have Northern Iowa versus Louisville. Look, I liked Northern Iowa. They're a nice little story, being one of few non-Power 4 conference teams to make it out of the first round. But Louisville's on a mission, because Louisville, if you all don't know this by now, Louisville is hosting the Final Four and the national championship, which will be on ESPN and ABC, respectively. Well, ESPN for the semifinals, and then ABC and ESPN Plus for the national championship. But yeah, I just see Louisville beating Northern Iowa. I think Northern Iowa can give Louisville a battle, but let's keep it a buck. Northern Iowa I don't think they hold a candle to Louisville. Then next we have Penn State versus North Carolina. That's going to be a nice little matchup right there. Again, a little bit of a Penn State connection from both teams and their coaching staffs. But I think Penn State should stand on business. If Penn State can handle Nebraska, especially since Penn State has not lost a match at home this season, I think Penn State can handle business against North Carolina. Again, this is no disrespect to North Carolina. I just think Penn State at Rec Hall in women's volleyball is going to be a force to be reckoned with. And then dropping down and looking at the last round 2 matchup, we have Nebraska hosting Miami, Florida. Again, if Nebraska thinks this is going to be an easy win right there, they have another thing coming. I think Miami is going to really push Nebraska to the edge. But Nebraska at the Bob or the Bob Devaney Center in Lincoln just is a whole different team. Like, that atmosphere, it's on my bucket list of places to go as an NCAA volleyball content creator and whatnot. So I think for Nebraska, they should win, but I think Miami challenges them quite a bit. I think Miami kind of makes them sweat. It's not going to be like a 25-3 set win for Nebraska, but it's going to be a barn burner. So, yeah, that's pretty much that for the second round matches for today. Pretty much a lot of 1 versus 8 matchups, with the lone exception of Kansas versus Florida and Stanford versus LMU. But there you have it right there. That's kind of your round 2 preview. I guess I'll save the round of 16 for later. I mean, I kind of teased at the fact that we would get round of 16, but I'll save the round of 16 for Monday's show. So there you have it right there. And yeah, sorry everybody, you'll have to wait till Monday's official show. All right, but that is that for the second round matches. So jumping over to NCAA Division III women's volleyball, and then I'll let you all go because we're nearing the top of the hour. So the Division III final is set. We have Juniata, the Division III women's volleyball powerhouse, taking on Wisconsin Whitewater. So how Juniata got here? They swept Penn State of Altona. Penn State of Altona. They took down Virginia Wesleyan. They took down Middlebury in the following round. Then they took down Laverne in the quarterfinals, which Laverne was actually kind of one of their big challenges. Like, I don't know if y'all saw that one, but Laverne had their backs against the wall. They were down 24-19. They eventually tied it up at 24 apiece, but Juniata slammed the door shut on them. And then Juniata reverse swept Hope. Now, if you all remember, or if you all have been keeping track, Juniata has won not 2, not 3, not 10, not 20, not 50, but 90 6 straight matches in a row, which I don't think is ever going to be replicated again, which I think it's pretty darn impressive. But they needed a reverse sweep to take down Hope, which actually was a rematch of last year's NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship game. So Hope obviously had that in the back of their mind, but Juniata was able to stand on business and get that win, like the talented team that they are. So I think this is going to be a fun little NCAA Division III final. It's going to be on ESPN Plus. Yeah, one day we'll hopefully have all of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Championships on one national championship platform, but I digress. But Juniata's opponent will be Wisconsin Whitewater. So looking at Wisconsin Whitewater and their path to the final, it looks like they were a number 1 seed in the bracket or in their region. They took down Ohio Wesleyan in straight sets. They took down Wisconsin Eau Claire in straight sets. And then we had Wisconsin Whitewater taking down Wisconsin Platteville in straight sets. Then we had Wisconsin Whitewater taking down Emory in straight sets. And then Wisconsin Whitewater took down Johns Hopkins in a 5-set thriller, which was actually the first 2 sets that Wisconsin Whitewater lost in the NCAA tournament this season. Those are the only 2 sets that Wisconsin Whitewater has lost in the NCAA Division III tournament. So it's Wisconsin Whitewater versus Juniata. I think this is going to be a fun matchup right here. Juniata being coached by the wife of Mark Pavlik, Heather Pavlik, has done a fantastic job with this team. I think for Juniata, the pressure is on them. They're obviously in the thick and meat and potatoes of the NCAA Division III Women's Volleyball Tournament, and I think this is going to be a big challenge for them. But if they continue to play their brand of volleyball, if they just focus on themselves and not on the opponent, and they just don't focus on the streak altogether and just have some fun, I think this team can win match number 97 in a row, and they can win the NCAA Division III championship for a 3rd straight year, which I think would be very nice for Juniata. They've really turned themselves into a powerhouse, and it'll be interesting to see if they can win. Their last loss came in September of 2022. I think it was like September 16th, where they lost to Trinity, which ironically enough, that was the team that they beat in the national championship in Division III that same year. So I think for Juniata, the pressure is on them, but obviously a great team like that isn't going to be intimidated by Wisconsin Whitewater and all the pressure in the world. I think Wisconsin Whitewater is definitely going to bring it. They've got a lot of talented hitters. Juniata's got a lot of talented hitters, but I think we're in for an instant classic. Again, it's going to be on ESPN Plus. Do not miss it. Also, don't miss the NIVC as well. We don't have a whole lot of time to go over that, but I promise you, by the bottom of my heart, I will go over the NIVC come Monday's show, which will be episode 276. This is just an extra side gig, because if you all remember, I did set point extra points. I had several different guests like Nick England of the NVA, Jeff Nygaard, Alex Knight of UCLA, Aiden Knight, and Mason Briggs. I forget who else I had as a guest. I'm going to try to fire that up once I pretty much quit my my other real life job. But on that note, that is going to do it for this episode of Set Point Extra Points. I really do appreciate everybody that tuned in. Looks like quite a bit of you tuned in. I really do appreciate it. It really does mean a lot that you support this show, because I'm going to say this right now. Next year is the year where I really try to make the push to try to be one of the voices of volleyball and one of like the big time media members of volleyball, kind of like an Emily Eamon or a Michaela Chester or a Daniel Gilman or anything of that sort. Like, I want to be well known as a media member for NCAA, not just men's volleyball, but women's volleyball as well, and volleyball in general. And not just on the collegiate level, but on the professional level as well. So that's going to be my big goal. And I guess I'll just say this right now. I'm going to try to make the push to try to be one of the big voices of NCAA men's volleyball, try to get my name out there, try to get Set Point out there, trying to get NCAA men's volleyball to have themselves a show, kind of like how the AVCA has 6 rotations. So hopefully I can make the push to get the AVCA to push forward NCAA men's volleyball show. But Until then, that's going to do it for this episode of Set Point Extra Points. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Have a great rest of the weekend. Enjoy all the volleyball action, which will be starting up in 10 minutes. And I will see you Monday for another episode of Set Point. Have a great weekend, everybody. Peace.